Hello and welcome to the Lib Dem Podcast. Now, we have had lots of interviews with MPs, MEPs and old elected buggers like Richard Kemp. But what we haven't heard of much is the people behind these campaigns, the organisers, the people that get people where they should to be, where the leaflets are going and why they're getting printed in such a way. So I'm really happy that we have got a round table here today of young-ish organisers within the party who help drive some really successful campaigns in places like Hazel Grove, Sheffield, and in the other places in the country as well. So I'm going to introduce them all firstly. And Curtis, I mean, you're going to start us off. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yep. So my name's Curtis Crossland. I'm the organiser in Sheffield. So I not only cover Sheffield Hallam, but Sheffield Local Authority. I became the organiser in 2016, so my first election was actually all ups, which was baptism of fire, I think. And then obviously we had the general election a year later, and then another general election a couple of years after that. So it's been quite hands-on since I started.
Frankie?
Frankie Singleton. I'm the constituency organiser for Hazel Grove constituency Lib Dems. Mine's much simpler than Curtis. I've just got Hazel Grove constituency, which is one constituency in one council area, which makes it much easier. I started as an organiser in 2018. I was working part-time for the party before that, for the 2018 locals, then started as an organiser after those, and have done, I don't even know how many elections since. I've lost count, which is a bit crazy for 2 years worth of work.
Well, to be fair, there were 3 last year, so that's...
And we had a by-election as well, so...
And last but by no means least, we have Tom.
Yes, my name's Tom Gordon, and I have been working as one of the party's local election field organisers, and prior to that was working as one of the national field organisers on the general election campaign. And prior to that, I've been elected up in Newcastle when I finished uni up there as a councillor, and now I'm the only Lib Dem councillor on Wakefield Council as well. So been here, there and everywhere, and worked for an MEP too.
That just shows you the kind of the madness over the last few days. You've had about 20 jobs in the space of 3 years, Tom. We'll start off just to give people an idea, because a lot of people do volunteer campaigning. A lot of listeners like this will be volunteers. How did you guys first get involved? Were you always Liberal Democrats in your heart, or did you? I mean, Frankie, you just alluded to there that you started doing a little bit beforehand. Is that how most of you started?
I went to university in America and then came back and didn't know what to do with myself, and ended up speaking to one of our councillors, or he wasn't a councillor then, we just got him elected, who was my old politics teacher, and he was like, well, come help at the 2017 general, we always need volunteers. So yeah, I started with just sort of small delivery leaflets, knocking on doors, that kind of thing, and ended up being reeled in quite quickly, I think.
That's a very familiar reeled in for anyone who works with the Lib Dems. What about yourself, Curtis?
Fairly similar. So I voted Lib Dem for the first time in 2010. It's the first time I could vote, and then felt a little bit disheartened by the coalition. And then 2014 happened, which was a disaster, and I felt some sort of pain inside. I didn't quite know why, so I thought I need to join that party. So I put my money where my mouth was, joined the party, got reeled in, and then got a job in 15, kind of being the print monkey. It was my job to print everything in the 2015 general election. And then it was all downhill from there.
Tom, what about yourself? So did you always think, because you're an elected councillor, like I said, on Wakefield, so did you always think was it more you wanted to be elected, or was it more of a backroom staff that you always wanted to be?
I don't really know how I've ended up where I am, to be quite honest. So I can remember, like, going back to what Curtis just said about 2010 general election was the first time that I was sort of engaged and sort of interested. I wasn't old enough to vote then, sadly, but my mum supposedly voted Liberal Democrat, she says, on my behalf. I was then a little bit disillusioned because I went away to university and was the first year to be hit by the treble tuition fees, which in retrospect, obviously now I know, was a little bit stupid because I pay less back under the current system than I did than I would have done under the old one. So I'm actually better off for it. But, at the time, I tried to that to an 18-year-old. But yeah, no, I joined the Liberal Democrats on the day Theresa May called the snap general election in 2017. And within 24 hours had 2 different Liberal Democrat councillors in Newcastle round to introduce themselves, say hi, and obviously give me some leaflets to deliver. And then it just sort of escalated from there. So I never really sort of knew that I wanted to be elected as a councillor. I never really questioned what local government did until I ended up involved in it. But yeah, then it just sort of escalated from there. Did some delivery, did some surveys, did some door knocking, and then it was, well, why don't you run for council? And then just ended up working for the party in odd jobs here and there, really.
I'll be interested to what the panel thinks on. Do you think the Lib Dems and other political parties in the UK put too much emphasis on actually people getting elected? Like, from my personal point of view, this sounds ridiculous because I'm a triple-hatted councillor who's ran for MP. But I'm not sure if I had the option, I would prefer to be a councillor or I'd prefer to be an organiser. I think sometimes I'm happiest when I get other people elected. Now, is that something you think that we don't do enough of as a reward and give enough emphasis on people on the back room, people like you guys are? You're allowed to be critical of the party. It's okay. I'll give it to you, Frankie, to start with, shall we?
Oh gosh. So I still never want to ever be elected. It is not something that interests me. So yeah, I agree with you about getting people elected is by far, in my opinion anyway, the best part of any of this. So when I first started, in Stockport we're very strong locally, but we don't do so well nationally. So when I first started, I'd come into a winning team anyway. So my first year we won 6 out of 6. My second year we won 6 out of 6, and it's just been great. I think we do. I don't know. I think we do appreciate backroom. I certainly feel appreciated anyway around where I am and in Stockport. I don't know whether that's true everywhere. I'm assuming it's probably not, because we're very lucky here in Hazel Grove. I know that with sort of the organisation that we've got, and it's much, much more difficult in areas where there's not an office with staff. So it's probably a very different experience for those people who don't have that kind of organisation around them.
I think, to clarify my point, it's not really about, say, your councillors being unappreciative of what you do. It's whether or not we appreciate the role of backroom staff within politics in Britain. You think of, everything's hyped up in America anyway, but you think of the organisation that goes into an American elections, and being part of that staff is considered quite a big deal. But it's whether or not we don't have enough attention to that in the UK.
So I think, sorry to continue, but I think in some ways you're right. Does seem to be more appreciated in America. But I think in other ways we're much better off in this country. So I can't speak for other parties because I have no idea how they work. But I know that in America, sort of, you work for a campaign. You don't generally work for the Democrats, for example. You work for Obama's 2012 campaign, and you paid not very well, really not very well. You overworked. And I think, it's kind of, there's some level of, I can't think of the word, it's appreciation for that work, but there's no sort of continual career in it in the same way that I think there is over here.
And I think that's something that we need to get in, actually a greater career prospects and recognition within politics. And that is the way maybe Lib Dems need to go in order to be, because, we have little pockets. And then you've seen it in local parties where, the main person drops out and then suddenly the whole local party seems to collapse like a house of cards. And actually having some sort of structure is in place. But of course, that needs money, which is difficult, because how many local parties can afford a campaign organiser or fund for it? Because a lot of the time they're funding just to get the leaflets out. So how do you bridge that gap? I mean, Tom, as someone who, like you say, a local election coordinator, I bet you find this difficulty quite a lot with local parties, that there's no money to get that structure underneath.
I think the thing for me that's been really sort of interesting, having no sort of preconceptions about what political parties do or how they're structured, and coming into the Liberal Democrats, is that we always say that we're like a big party of devolution and we want to let local people make decisions, but then we still do have some really highly centralised things. So, I mean, if you look at the way that some of the campaigns out of HQ are run, like they are done well, broadly speaking, but sometimes it seems quite top down. I think for me, we seem to be missing a tier. So we have like people who are doing constituency stuff or local party stuff, and we have the high-end HQ stuff, but there just doesn't seem to be anything at that regional level, which to me, if you were to have money like plowed out coming down from HQ, putting money into the regions and encouraging the regions to work collectively across, like to me, that would be the way that it would sort of bridge that gap that we've got, and that's something that we don't seem to have at the minute. So I think you can go from one local party where, like, for instance, Sheffield's a great example of this, where they've got a decent-sized council group of the opposition poised to take control, hopefully, and they've got staff, they've got money, they've got an office. And you can look somewhere next door and they're able to tap into that. So if you look at, like, either Rotherham or Barnsley, where we've got councillors and we work collectively together in some sense. But then you look a little bit further afield, like to West Yorkshire, and we don't necessarily have the same sort of hub that other places like South Yorkshire do. So it's quite disparate, and it'd be great to have a one-size-fits-all approach, but I don't know if we can have that. But equally, I don't think what we've got at the minute is necessarily working. So it's really quite. I don't know how you sort of balance that, but it feels like we're missing something. I'm just not sure what it is.
And I actually agree with you. I think it's to do with the regions. And as a local party councillor and everything else, I could say I couldn't really tell you what the region did up until the point of the European elections. And that was probably the point where you thought, okay, we had suddenly a coordinating thing across the region to say, okay, this is the Northwest, here's your leaflets where you can get them from. And actually, I think the weakness of our regions, I still go to regional conferences, but can anyone say they've been blown away with how energetic they are? Probably not. And so I think that there is probably that. I think you're right, Tom. There's probably a structure needed. I mean, what do you think, Curtis?
Yeah, I agree with what Tom said. And I think, if memory serves me correctly, pre-2015, regions did used to have staff, or at least the party had some sort of regional type staff.
Yeah.
I'm guessing we lost all those when we, lost all our MPs. And I can understand us kind of retreating back when times get tough. But as soon as we go on the front foot, we need to push back out. And I do think we need some sort of regional type coordinator, even simply for training as well. Because I don't know how everyone else has found it, but when I became an organiser, I didn't really get much training from a national party. It was kind of a sink or swim type moment. So I think somebody who can focus on the local parties and give them the attention they deserve would massively help the party go forward.
And that kind of leads us on, Curtis. Actually, you might as well come back into it since you brought it up, about what the key elements of your role. So what is a day or a week-to-week kind of operations like for you? When we were having the discussion before we came on, the word dog's body came up several times. Is it about just dealing with everything and everything just to get the machine running smoothly? Is that how you see it?
Yeah, so I'm guessing it's different for different local parties, but my job in Sheffield is just to get people elected no matter what. So we have a phrase, and it's do whatever it takes to make the boat go faster. Yeah. So if I don't know, there's a member's letter that somebody's taking a time over, then we will have to find a way to speed it up and things. So my general day, it's a bit tough. During election or outside of an election?
Well, either. So lockdown's not a great time right now, but say you were in the peacetime area like you're doing in summer. Tell us about, so what are the key goals you guys do during the peacetime element before you ramp up to April next year?
So we always try and do a leaflet a month regardless. So my main job is kind of coming up with the stories, working with the councillors to come up with good stories for each area, writing the leaflets, sending them off to print, and organising the kind of logistics of getting them through people's doors. But then there's also the managing the message that each leaflet has as well, which is quite important, and kind of seeing where we want to be at the election to make sure that the message will fit into that. Getting people out door knocking, that's the most important but arguably the hardest thing to do. And press releases, members' emails, voter emails, social media, all that kind of stuff.
Is about the same for you, Frankie?
Yeah, that sounds very familiar. And I'd say also running campaigns, making sure that, what have we done recently? We saved a bus recently, so making sure that campaign is sort of started and followed through to the end, and owned by us. I think I'll say, same things, leaflets, printing, writing leaflets, writing direct mail merges, complex mail merges are the bane of my life. Although I think I've started to enjoy them, which I think there's something wrong with me. I did so many of them during the general election that then I like them, and there's clearly something wrong. But yeah, all the same things. Curtis said, really, it doesn't vary too much, apart from herding cats, which Curtis has to do as well. The councillors are impossible to herd.
And do you think it's all about almost like being the safety net for stuff? Because, you know, as someone who's a counsellor, you have a million things going on. And actually, I've done it myself. I thought, whatever happened to that issue I was dealing with? And actually, that's where you guys are to say, actually, you know what, the new pedestrian crossing we're trying to get, the bus route we're trying to save, the incinerator we're against, or whatever else. It's you guys just keeping things moving and, like I say, keeping that train going, really. Is that kind of how you see it, Tom?
I think my experience has been fairly different, because I've only ever really known, like, election time. I've never had peacetime, just due to the nature of my roles. So it's always been sort of quite full on. So in the general election, like, that was just literally endlessly, like, getting people out, trying to run like 3 canvassing sessions a day and making sure we were getting at least 200 like contacts and voter data from them, aiming to get over a few thousand of pieces of data a week. And like, that was a metric and goals that I was working to. It was very data orientated. So when, in the general election, it was just literally endlessly canvassing, trying to set up. And I did some training, like trying to get people who haven't necessarily used minivan or anything like that before, just sort of a quick and easy sort of like in the street, sort of, this is how you do it, this is how you go, get people set up. Obviously, in theory, it should take 5 minutes. Never does. But yeah, like even just on the go sort of things like that, I had to as well. We had to organise when Newsnight came through to do a segment as well, trying to sort of liaise and make sure everything ran smoothly for that. And I've never seen so many people door knocking as when they knew the camera was going to turn up and they all wanted to be on TV. So you can imagine my surprise when I was expecting maybe 15 people to turn up, and we had over 30, and then we ended up basically knocking on every door on the street simultaneously. That was again like trying to herd cats. So that was so managing sort of media things too has been a fun one. It's novel, something that I never thought necessarily I'd be doing, but it's a very typical day.
So, I mean, one of the things because I obviously do I'm the campaign organiser here in Preston and Wyre as well. So how do you deal with people that have differences of opinion, particularly councillors? So we have one guy who is vehemently against any sort of bar chart. He has absolute bar chart hatred within the local party. And, you know, at the moment I'm winning that fight, you know, because, you know, the whole kind of Tories can't win here, blah, blah, blah. How do you deal with personality difference? Does that come to you, or is that like more the leader of the group or the local party that deals with that? Or do you have any role in that kind of smoothing that out?
It's fun. So, I mean, I'm quite lucky here because our chair, John Dryden, is amazing. And whenever there's any sort of personal differences, he is the person to sort it out. So I'm just like, please, John, just please deal with it. And he's very good at that. And the bar charts is a great example, actually, because we have several people who don't like the bar charts. And no matter how much evidence we give them about, well, you just have to squeeze the third party. It's simple. Okay, you always say, no, if it doesn't work like that. But we have the evidence.
Yeah.
And John is great at making them feel listened to while I'm sat there just like, evidence.
What about you, Frankie? You've got you've got a group that's very successful in Stockport, hoping to take back the council or become the biggest party in the council. How do you deal with different demands? So one area, just say, is more Tory facing, one area is more Labour facing. How do you deal with those sorts of scenarios?
Yeah, it's incredibly difficult. It really is. So we've got 6 different wards, all but, well, sometimes there's one that's sometimes Labour, sometimes Tory, 4 that are always Tory, and one that's always been Labour, but last time the Tories came second by 2 votes, as in between second and third there were 2 votes. Because it's almost like we've successfully squeezed them too much, which I know can't be done. That is a criminal sentence that I've just said. But obviously, because of that, the councillors in those areas, they don't like the bar charts. They disagree with the bar charts. So I'm lucky enough not to work on my own. I have 2 other members of staff with me. And you just got to find the right person to speak to the right people. You've got to know, oh, yeah, Gemma is the best dealing with that person. Oh, yeah, no, Hillary. So we're very, very lucky to have Hillary Stevenson in Hazelgrove as well. And Hillary Stevenson is often the right person to deal with people. And it's just knowing how to, like, what is the answer to give that person that's going to get them to agree with us. It's incredibly difficult. It's probably the hardest part of the job is persuading people that I'm always right, which is just not really a question.
Okay, though I've got a question for all 3 of you then. I've got, because of the awkwardness of next year's elections, I've got a county seat, which is Tory facing, and my city ward, which is Labour facing, combined together. What do you do there for your bar chart? Ask Hillary.
Yeah, ask Hillary Stevenson, that's the answer. Or Chris Lovell. Chris Lovell is always my go-to as well. Yeah. Whichever the best bar chart is, put it on. Yeah.
I think squeezing Labour is still going to be the thing for me. But what are the key aspects you think of a successful campaign? We talk about bar charts, and third-party squeeze is really important. Door knocking is really important. I mean, someone said to me, "There's 3." Think of a campaign as being like a tripod. You have 3 legs, and it's money, data, and manpower. And without those, you can't really do it. So, Tom, starting with you, what do you think are the key aspects to a successful campaign?
I think for me, out of those 3 you've sort of just highlighted, I think you can still do stuff on the cheap. Like, I mean, in terms of looking at some of the places and some of the campaigns that we've run, like in Sunderland, like the by-election that I was involved up in there, like that was, I mean, it was Rhizoed stuff, it was dirt cheap, it wasn't very expensive. As long as you've got the manpower and sort of the data, I think those out of the 3, to me, those are the 2 that I'd sort of lean towards. I think fundamentally it's about building a team, so you've got a common sense of purpose, because you want to make sure that even after a win or a lose, that you've still got something that's going to sort of stand the test of time, and that's, to me, one of the really important things. So obviously, if you have a by-election or anything like that, it can be really exciting, get loads of people piling in, and then what after? It's about generating that buy-in. So I think, to me, it's about building something that's more than just winning as well, about something that's going to have a positive impact for everyone, really.
And I think, particularly with 2019 having such a good year for the Lib Dems, so we took a ward that had been Tory for probably about 4 decades here in Preston, to make sure that doesn't go back is key. I mean, we can't all have Frankie's success rate of being basically 100% in 2 years. So, Curtis, what about you? What do you think?
Sadly.
Curtis, what do you think? What are your most successful aspects, you think, of a good campaign?
I think message is the most important thing. Without a message, you're not going to get the volunteers motivated and mobilised. You're not going to get the voters reading anything. I think the general election was a perfect example of an election where we technically ran it perfectly. Like, the number of leaflets would have been great if they said something that meant something to people, and they didn't mean anything, so they were irrelevant. They were just recycled. So I think message is the most important thing in any sort of campaign. And then after that, it's how you tell that message to people. So we've got so many options now with leaflets and Facebook and emails and all that sort of stuff. I still think paper's the best way to go, to be honest, because if you get something through the door, you probably are going to pick it up. The amount of emails I just delete without even opening. But everything's still important.
And as someone who spent quite a bit of the general election putting paper through door in Hazel Grove, what do you think, Frankie?
I think, same as what Tom and Curtis said. But I think something Ed Davey said. We had a call with Ed Davey, some staff and organisers, on Tuesday, and he said was it 97 he first won? What made the difference was people having fun and really enjoying it. So if you look at the 2019 general, it was fairly horrendous for many reasons, but particularly polling day in Hazel Grove. So it wasn't fun for the reasons you like. So it didn't go great. And John, you were there, and you were being very
so wet. It was so yeah.
And we knew it wasn't going well from the things people were saying. You always know, don't you? But I think people had fun regardless. Like, we had these two guys come down from Pendle who weirdly knew my great uncle or something. It was a weird thing. And they were singing Christmas carols coming in and out, singing Christmas carols and going out again for like a 9:30 door knock in the pouring rain with Christmas lights around their neck. And it was horrendous, but they had fun. And I think that if you can make it not entertaining, but something people really want to take part in, it makes a huge difference. So it was bad, but I mean, without that, I would guarantee it would have been worse.
You need to make it a social occasion as well, really, don't you?
Yeah.
If anyone wants to know who that was, I'm absolutely sure that was Councillor David Whip from Pendle. It absolutely was. He's my leader on Lancashire County Council. So, but that's a really interesting point that I've got, and not an issue with, but something I struggle with in my local party is that a lot of the time people are volunteers, and you want to motivate them, but not drive them to do more, but not in a way that's going to push them away. And that must be a really difficult balance for you guys as well. How do you guys cope with that?
I think one of the problems with, like, for instance, the general election most recently was, like, going back to what we were just talking about, like trying to make people have fun and motivate people. I think deep down, when we saw some of the stuff that was happening nationally, is we knew it wasn't going well. So that made it really difficult on the ground for anyone in any seat to try and motivate people, because you're sort of coming up conflicting against, like, when you can see quite clearly some of the messages not landing. So, and like, I had doors in the general election where we'd knock on doors and people going, "Oh, I won't vote for Jo because she's a woman." Like, how do you motivate people when you come up to, like, things like that? It's really quite difficult, like, when you've got sort of blatant sexism like that and misogyny. So I think even in cases like that, when it's quite frankly a little bit grisly and a little bit of a car crash, like, it is just about trying to make sure that people, even if it's not the goal that you're aiming for, it's still a goal. Do you know what I mean? Trying to keep people motivated and generate, like, well, everything we do now is still going to, I say this, back in December, you could still be thinking, oh, well, do you know what I mean? In Sheffield, for instance, oh, well, we could possibly take control of the council in 6 months' time. It's about having some sort of narrative, some sort of story, to try and keep people motivated. But it can be, like, when you have the rain and the weather and it was just miserable, was December. Like, that, I think, for me, has been the hardest experience, like, since being a Liberal Democrat. So I don't know, like, for me, like, it can obviously, and I think in stressful situations, like, everyone's tempers and whatnot can get a little bit sort of frayed at the edges. And I think it's just about trying to make it fun. And I think that's what it comes back to, as in what was said earlier as well. Like, even if you can have an action day, put on some food, go to the pub afterwards. Like, genuinely, I think every time I've run an action day where you mentioned the pub, like, you have more people turn up just because it's going to be social afterwards. Everyone will begrudgingly knock on the doors for an hour or two if it means that we're all going to get to sit down and have a little bit of a chinwag after, usually.
We're way too far into the lockdown to mention the pub word. Oh, how could you do it to us, our poor listeners? But I think I always said about setting yourself goals, you know, because, again, smaller local parties, you might think, well, I'm not going to be running this council. We're not going to have the MP in the near future. But there's always goals you can have. And Tom, you're the lone councillor on Wakefield. So the idea that you're suddenly going to become the leader of the council is probably not an ambition you've got for next year. But actually,
no, not next year.
No, but there'll be goals that you'll want, and it's important to give people that to strive for, little successes.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it can be quite difficult. Like, for me, having now, like, trying to sort of herd Wakefield Lib Dems into winning, like, it's like, without sounding condescending, like, winning is not something that they're used to. So it's like trying to actually now get them into the habit of that and saying, well, look, We still have quite a lot of people, even here in the local party, who might like their local councillor of a different persuasion. But I like them. And I'm like, yeah, but what's better, a Tory or Labour councillor or a Liberal Democrat one? And if it's facing Labour, then obviously it's just trying to make them understand that at the end of the day, even if you like Joe Bloggs, do you like the administration that they're part of? And that's, I mean, it's that messaging to try and make sure that people sort of have something that spurs them on. But no, absolutely, I think you're right in terms of making sort of manageable targets that are really tangible. Obviously, it's usually quite nice when they're allowed by-elections because it keeps you on your toes all the time anyway, doesn't it? But can't have those either at the minute, which has been a little bit infuriating because obviously I anticipated that I would no longer be alone.
What about
screaming into the void?
And what about you, Curtis? How do you keep the Sheffield Lib Dems kind of active? Because obviously Sheffield was probably a little bit disappointing. You came so close to taking Hallam back.
Yeah.
And how do you get the guys back on their feet and back ready to go again?
I think having the local elections to focus on did help to get us moving after December. But it's quite tough here because we're really tired. So obviously we had an uphill struggle holding Hallam in 15, but we did it. And then we had all-ups in 16. Then we had a by-election late 16. Then another by-election and the general election in 17, then another by-election just after the 17 general election, then the locals in 18 and 19, and then the general election in 19. So everyone's got a bit of election fatigue.
Yeah.
We just have to, and it's something we're working on actually, just refocus on why people became Lib Dems to begin with, because if they remember why they became a member of a party, then we make the link that actually putting leaflets through doors, making phone calls, helps us achieve that goal. I think it is making that big arc between this is what you want the country to look like, so let's get campaigning to do that.
I mean, Frankie and Curtis, I'm really interested in your point because I'm talking about my own experience. So in 2019, we won my ward with about 60% of the vote. Great stuff. Happy days. When it came to the general election, we did the box count, so maybe we'd gone down to like 16 to 17% of the vote. Now, you guys are both representing marginal target seats for the general. How do you go about converting the kind of local politics where you can be, the community champion, kind of we're the people that save your bus route, into converting that into dealing with national messages? Frankie, how do you go about that?
That is probably, I said before the hardest thing, I can't remember what I said the hardest thing about my job was, but I think you said something else that's the hardest thing about my job. Green and Romilly, which is Lisa Smart's ward, we absolutely smash it every year. The councillor that won in 2019 got the highest, something stupid like the highest majority, the biggest majority Stockport's ever seen, something ridiculous like that. And then in the general election, it's still Lisa. They love Lisa. She's got amazing name recognition, but they won't vote for her because they're scared of Jeremy Corbyn, or they won't vote for her because they're scared of Boris. And I don't know the answer to the question. I don't, because it's something we've really struggled with. Because we had people on, one of our councillors knocked on a door PV weekend in the general, and they said, I hope Lisa wins. Okay, who have you voted for? I voted Conservative. How do you fight against that? I don't know what the answer is. You just, it's fighting stupidity sometimes, and it's really difficult. It's really, really difficult.
What about you, Curtis? How do you find it?
I think, to begin with, I think that the fixing potholes and stuff is still incredibly important. I think Tim Farron says no issue is too small, because it just helps us talk to people and kind of be normal. And I'm sure Tom will pipe up in a minute that you shouldn't try and be an MP if you haven't tried to be a councillor first, because you kind of get used to doing all that sort of stuff. But in terms of converting it to a national vote, it's it's the $1 million question, really. And I think we just need a brand as a party. I say that flippantly, like it's an easy thing to do, which it isn't. But the Stop Brexit thing that happened in 19 isn't a message, it's an issue. What is it that links all our issues together and builds a narrative? And we haven't had that since 2010, when Nick had the kind of underdog insurgent type narrative. And I just think that we need to go back to basics nationally, and then hopefully it will all fall into line.
I think we try too hard as a party, not intentionally, but we try too hard with nuance. Now, you can't have nuanced flagship policies. So we had people, if you knock on someone's door and we've got a great door knocker who knows the issues back to front, knows the Lib Dem policy for everything, and has a conversation, a 10-minute conversation with somebody on the door, they can convert them sometimes. But you can't do that with every voter in the ward. You can try, but it's not going to happen. We can't. I think nuanced policy it's just been our downfall. The Stop Brexit thing, in itself, if we get a majority, we will stop Brexit. That it doesn't work. We can't have that as a flagship policy. It undermines everything, if you ask me.
Yeah, I think that was one of the things in the general election. I was scattered around Yorkshire, and when I was in Leeds Northwest for a bit, we were knocking on doors in places like Otley and Yeadon, where we've got the local councillors, were quite Lib Dem-y, were the areas that won it when Greg Mulholland kept his seat. But when it came to Brexit, it was again that conflicting message. How can you say, it's really quite difficult to take it from local to national when the people there have completely diametrically opposed views. So you just can't sell that message. What was quite weird for me is, as well as organising in the general election, I was a candidate in my constituency where I'm a councillor. And then at my box count, I was absolutely just finding it hilarious that I came second, even though it was a 70% vote leave area, and they all absolutely are Brexity as anything, but they liked me because I fixed the potholes. So coming back to what Curtis said, absolutely, I think for me, the way that you sort of try and transcend that local national is muddy the water. If you've got a candidate who's fixed a pothole, why does it matter that that's a council issue? They've still fixed a problem for you. Why shouldn't that win them a vote in any election? It doesn't matter what type it is. It's about showing that you care and that you're passionate about the community, whatever community that may be, whether it's a ward, a town, or a constituency. And I think that's something that does transcend those boundaries.
I suppose the argument would be, the sound's gone a bit funny, but I suppose the argument would be is that if you don't have a kind of a narrative or something that Curtis is alluding to, some sort of overall kind of theme towards your campaign, then you might get a success like Burnley had. Very strong issue that led us to get the Burnley MP about a hostel being shut, got the MP, and then it completely crashed and burned in 15. Burnley's an extreme case because Lib Dems picked up from all the disillusionment with Labour. The BNP were on the rise. Lib Dems swept in, took the council, took the MP, and have completely and utterly gone since 2015 to the point now Burnley's now a Tory seat. So it's about having something that holds as well, isn't it? Because we're just talking about holding seats. If you can win, you can win a vote on brilliant local politics, but keeping a vote is so much harder. How do you do that?
More leaflets.
More leaflets. You guys have been really well trained. So we've talked about some of the successes that campaigns need to look at. What are the most common failings you find of things that where it doesn't quite? What do people go wrong with? Do people sometimes give too much attention to social media when actually the vast majority of voters don't choose how they vote on social media? I don't know if you want to go first on this, Frankie. What do you think of some things you think, wow, that really didn't work?
I'm not sure. I think, like Curtis said earlier, the campaign in 2019, for example, it ticked all the boxes for a good campaign. There was the places where it fell down a little bit, so the door knocking wasn't to the level we'd expect in a summer general election, because it's dark at 3:00 in the afternoon and it's pouring down with rain all day, and it's really hard to motivate those volunteers. But yeah, I think arguing with people who don't like the leaflets and think we should do it all on social media is something that I think is getting more and more common, and it's certainly something that I've had that argument many times. So, like you say, people don't change their vote on social media, do they? Their social media is an echo chamber. I mean, mine's just as bad. I'm not going to pretend that I don't want to go on Twitter and scroll through and get angry about what people are saying. That's not fun. That's not good for my mental health. So, yes, being on social media, promoting our ideas and promoting what we've done is great, but you can't replace leaflets. So, yeah, I think arguing with people about that is probably spending too much time fighting with people who disagree with the crux of the campaign. I don't know. I don't know if that answers your question in any way, or if I went off on a tangent there a little bit.
No, I think it's right. I think you've laid it out. People on Twitter are in their own little echo chamber, and you can easily get distracted arguing with someone that's never going to change their vote. I mean, when I won my county seat 3 years ago, I got like 1,024 votes or something like that. I bet less than 24 of them were based on my social media presence. By all means, if you've got time, do it. I like doing it because it gives me a little bit of a boost to think, actually, I'm putting something out every day. It just, because you can't put a leaflet out every day as much as the party might want us to. But actually, it feels like I am talking out there to someone. Someone might read that message, but is it as influential? I mean, we've seen the stats. The best way of winning elections is door knocking, person-to-person contacts. But yeah, Curtis, what have you found or things that people put forward as excellent ideas that haven't quite worked out?
It's quite a tough one. Actually, no, something's just popped into my head. Trying to turn out non-voters is something that some of our members seem obsessed with, but it doesn't work. Right? If we've got a marked register and this person has never voted in a local or national election, we're not going to convince them to vote, no matter how much we talk to them. If they've voted in a national election and we're trying to turn them out in for a local, fine. Spam them with as many leaflets as possible, because sometimes you do get them, but you can't turn out a non-voter.
Yeah, and I think, that goes back to, what we've had lots of discussions about what parties can do now during lockdown, getting hold of their marked registers, getting that data into your systems, and then targeting the people who vote. But Tom, I want to ask you a little bit, because you guys are you're all younger than me, so I'm counting you as being young. There's been a lot of emphasis, and the Corbyn project put loads of stock in getting the youth vote out. There was and you can remember, I don't know if any of you can remember on election day, there was all this stuff on Twitter called the Youthquake that was going on. Oh, they've got it. And actually, you know what? It didn't happen at all.
And the same thing happened in America with Bernie Sanders. I mean, exactly the same.
That's what it is. It's a story. It's a narrative, and we're going to push it even if it's the case or not the case.
But what do we? We don't want to. We like Curtis has just said. You've got to. When it comes down to it, don't have infinite resources and time and manpower and whatever else. So you've got to, particularly as you get closer and closer to polling day, you concentrate more on the people are more likely to turn out, whether that's people who voted last time, postal voters, your Ds and Ps, all the rest of it. But some part of my brain says, I don't want to give up on these people either. Particularly, if we want, our party struggles to get new recruits. If you look at the average age of some of our council groups, I'm like half the age of the average councillor in Preston. How do we then engage those young people, Tom?
I think one of the things that I sort of came up against when I first joined the party is because young people, if you've just joined the party or you're new to the party, you don't necessarily feel like you know enough. And that for me was one of the things where when I sort of got involved, just sort of looking around, half the time, some of the people who've been there doing it for 10, 15 years are probably stuck in a way of doing it wrong. So if you've got a fresh set of eyes, you might actually be better than someone who thinks they know what they're doing when they're not. So I think it's about giving people, if I just sort of take the view, if someone of any age comes along and they want to do something, then absolutely encourage them and give them a platform and try and help them to do that. Because I think what other way is there to generate buy-in from people than giving them some sort of responsibility and trust? And I say that hesitantly because you don't want them to turn up to a meeting and end up with a local party position, because that seems to be what happens whenever anyone turns up to another officer role or something. But I think as well for me, as a young person, I've not necessarily been massively involved with the Young Liberals, but it feels very much like that is something that's sort of thought as an afterthought for the National Party. It seems very much like young people's issues should be like put over there and devolve to the Young Liberals, but then they don't necessarily get the airtime. So I think maybe it would be a better sort of, I don't know if like how you'd go about it, but maybe some sort of more like recognition for like young people who are doing things. Because if you look at any organiser role, like largely it does tend to be young people in them. So I think maybe it does go back to what you were saying earlier about recognition. And obviously within local parties, from what I've heard, most people do feel appreciated and recognised, but I don't know how you sort of then like offer people, like, do you know what I mean? You don't want people to be stuck in these roles and don't feel like they've got places to go. So I don't know really. I think it's quite a difficult one. I mean, I know myself, like, you don't want to end up putting other things on hold to be a councillor or be an organiser. So it's how do you take something away that's a tangible experience that's going to be useful in the future? So I mean, from the roles that I've had, like definitely now, like when I go into a job interview, like if I'm given like one of these sort of competency-based questions, like I can absolutely pick out an example from like the general election when something went wrong, obviously. And I mean, you can sort of, you can gain experience from it. So I think it's about making sure that it's worthwhile for young people.
And could we learn something from the successful voluntary organisations there where you do get something tangible from it? You know, it looks fantastic on a CV to be part of a volunteer organisation going forward. And again, I don't want to harp on about America too much, but that is certainly considered, when you're looking at college applications, your extracurricular work is very much seen as a positive. And whether the Lib Dems need to do that, actually, don't push local, whether it's young people or, you know, anyone away who want to contribute, give them a chance to and make them feel part of the team is probably what I would suggest. But I'm also very conscious, and we're going to wrap this up soon because this has been absolutely brilliant. I want to thank you all first before we start wrapping it up. But I'm very conscious, you know, that we speak to people. I mean, you guys are all in areas that have had a little bit of life in them for a while. That there are a lot of areas where, and when you look at the map of successes for the Lib Dems, there are huge areas where it's like one-man band almost, Lib Dem local parties. What's the one thing you could recommend to that person? And I'm really conscious of what Tom said. It shouldn't be about money. You know, Connect is now free or it's taken out of your sub, so you don't have to worry about that. Some of these really powerful tools are now available regardless of your size of your local party. So Curtis, I want to start with you. What's the one thing you would say to someone who's thinking, well, I don't know what I can do to make a difference? What would you say to them?
First of all, I'm going to say something controversial.
Okay.
Get rid of the sacred cows. So a lot, say if you post something on a Lib Dem campaigners Facebook group, like, I want to do something this way, sometimes a load of people jump in and say, that's not how we do it here. It doesn't matter. Just get out and talk to people and make a difference to people's lives, and then the rest will follow. And what's that old thing? If you've got something to say, stick it on a piece of paper and put it through a letterbox. It's as simple as that, really.
Frankie?
I'm not sure. I think what Curtis said, just get out and do it. Speak to LDC. I know I'll probably get bonus points for saying that.
Yeah, well done. Ching!
So I've been to Kickstart a couple of times now, and what really opened my eyes as somebody who's in a seat with an office with more than one member of staff, with a council group that have in the past run the council and are in now potentially going to run the council again. We held the seat until 2015, I think. Yeah, 2015. To go to Kickstart and do training courses with people who are the only person from their local party who's trying to knock on doors, and to sit in a Page Plus course, learning how to do leaflets with the people who are running for council and doing their own leaflets and delivering their own leaflets. I think that's really important to realise for those of us who are in organisations like local parties where for those of us who are in local parties where there is organisation, to realise there are people who have absolutely nothing and they're still getting out and doing it. That's really important. But also for people who are on their own and potentially aren't doing anything or want to do something, going to something like LDC's Kickstart, it makes such a difference, and it'll really give you those basic building blocks of how can I change things, how can I start and maybe win one council seat and build from there.
And Tom, to finish us off.
Yeah, I think one thing I would say is there's no such thing as a stupid question. Like the amount of times that I can remember when I first joined and people would be talking about D's and P's, and I'd be sat there like what on earth is it? What's a D and what's a P? And because everyone else is talking, you don't want to ask. The same with like PVs. At first, I was like, what's a PV? Yeah, I mean, like, I think quite often we do have a tendency to talk in abbreviations, and I'm guilty myself now. So I sort of, whenever I'm with any local party members now, I just like, if you don't, like, I mean, there's a disclaimer up front, like, if you don't know what I'm saying, just ask. Like, I will translate it into normal people words for you. But largely as well, the other sort of thing that I'd say is, like, if you don't do it, then it's probably not going to get done. So, like, if you want to do something, like, just crack on. Like, absolutely just grab a bull by the horns and just go for it, because it's not that anyone's stopping you. It's just probably that there's no one else who can do it or has the time, energy, or whatever to do it. So if you want to do it, then just do it.
And I feel incredible amounts of guilt now because what Tom said. So D and P is definite and probable. PV is postal voter. Have we done any more, guys, that we really need to explain before we go? I think they've all been my fault as well. But no, all I want to say is thank you, Kurt. Thank you, Curtis. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Frankie. Really appreciate it. Go show these guys some appreciation online. Make sure you follow everything to do with the Lib Dem Pod at Lib Dem Pod. You can find us on Instagram, on Twitter, and on Facebook. Do subscribe to us via your podcast provider or on YouTube, because we now do these as video, just because it's a handy thing with Zoom meetings. We've now upgraded for free, which is fantastic. But I want to thank you guys for coming on. Really appreciate it. Just so people are aware, we do know the general election review is coming out later today. So we might have to get these guys back and they can have a talk through of what happened with that review and their thoughts on it. I don't know if they'll be welcome. I'm just guilting them into agreeing to something now, so they can't say no. But thank you so much for listening. Do click on that bell icon. Do subscribe so you catch every episode. Thank you so much to these guys, and we'll be back with another episode very soon.